How's it going, friends, and welcome to episode 2 of the Cynical Den Podcast, a show for the kind of depressed person who wouldn't turn down the opportunity to perform open-heart surgery on themselves with their car keys. I'm your host, Fringy, and I hope this show provides you with some sort of escape from the dumpster fire that is planet Earth. I got very good feedback on the first episode. Everybody seemed to really enjoy it, which is great, and I'm sure that now that I've told you that lots of people enjoyed it, I'll get all the criticism that I could have ever wanted in the comments section of this episode of the podcast. Got some great topics for you, since things have actually happened, but first I want to start with a monologue for a video that I've always wanted to do, but that I never could really do because it wouldn't really fit on my channel. It was this thought that I had. I can't remember when I got it, but I just started thinking about this topic and then realized, oh, I'm surprised nobody's ever talked about this before. And that's vampires and how it would suck to be one. I don't really like vampires. I like the old style vampires. You know, the ones that were in like coffins and lived in Transylvania. But unfortunately, they're not really prominent anymore. Now it's these like young vampires in the United States who are living in the real world and are having lots of sex. It's like, oh, that's wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted from vampire stories. I just don't like modern vampire stuff because, I mean, first of all, most of it is directed at girls, teenage girls in particular, and you can see that philosophy ingrained in all of these movies and shows, where the whole point is basically to get the girls gushing over specific male vampires so that they keep coming back every year to watch the next movie, or they keep coming back to watch the next episode. It's exploitative, and they know it's exploitative, but it makes money. So I guess the capitalist in me is like, wow, that's a brilliant idea, good job. But the person in me who likes quality content obviously hates that. The thing is, I don't fundamentally hate the concept of vampire stories. Like I said, I like the old style of vampire, the really high fantasy style. But not only do I like it because they had cooler stories, more violent, more interesting stories, but also because in that context, vampires make sense. Whereas when you look at them in the modern context, it makes no sense. And in actuality, it's completely illogical because the moment you think about it, being a vampire sounds like the fucking worst. So let's look at it this way, right? What is a vampire? Let's start by explaining what a vampire is. A vampire is a dead person. You are effectively a zombie, except that your brain still works. Because you're dead and you're now revived, so you're a corpse. So just keep that thought in your mind. Every vampire is a corpse. They're like The Walking Dead. That in itself isn't a deal breaker because the trade-off is, oh, now you're immortal. You don't age and now you've got all these badass powers. Immortality is not actually as good as you think it is. And I'm not talking of the, oh, you know, I don't want to live forever. I'm talking more just the general logistics of never aging. I mean, think about it this way. You live in a town. There are certain people who are going to notice you. And I think in 10 years, when you still look identical to before, people are going to start wondering, hey, what's the deal with that? And let's not talk about what happens when you start dealing with documents. Oh, here's my driver's license. Oh, well, you look about 23, but it says you were born in 1965. So you're probably going to get arrested for fraud or identity theft. I mean, it means that you're going to have to constantly change your identity and move to different locations because eventually someone's going to clue into the fact, hey, that guy that I was friends with when I was 20 hasn't aged a day and I'm 70 now. And then you're going to get the Secret Service or the military hunting you down. It's funny, people don't think about this thing. Like, the fact that you don't age, everybody ages. It's a fundamental aspect of the world. It's important to remember that everybody ages and that our entire society is built around the fact that you grow up, you grow older, and then you die. Vampires completely throw a wrench into that whole thing. So you now are a person who can't age, which means you can't live in society, at least not for very long, and until you need to start moving before people start noticing what's up, and then the military come after you. Because, oh, and let's talk about that. The fact that you're gonna get hunted down by the military at some stage. No way you're gonna keep that a secret. Eventually, someone's gonna clue in. The military are gonna wanna find out, how is this dude not dead yet? He was born in like 1863 and he looks like a 25-year-old dude. And what are you gonna do then? What are you gonna do then? Oh, I can run really fast. Yeah, well, they got drones that can blow the shit out of you before you can get away. They got tanks. They got bullets. Bullets are faster than you're gonna run. And the anatomy makes no sense at all. I mean, okay, so the only way that you can kill a vampire is that you stake them in the heart. That doesn't make any sense because, I mean, first of all, you're dead, so you shouldn't even be able to walk around. This is a big issue with zombie stuff and anything that has to do with undead things. When you're dead and you've now established, oh, you don't need any of your organs or anything like that, you just need this one organ, nothing makes sense. I mean, it's a fundamental flaw with The Walking Dead as much as I like the comics. This idea that, oh, well, they don't need anything else but their brain, but blood needs to circulate in your body for you to walk. If only your brain can be affected, then you shouldn't be able to get up and walk at all. You need your heart, you need your lungs. These are all things you need to walk. If you have to get staked in the heart, does that mean that a bullet to the brain's not gonna kill you? So your brain doesn't work. What is going on now? But let's just say, okay, all right, let's look at it this way. So the way that it works if you're a vampire is that you need to be shot in the heart to die, which means that the military will start shooting you with like tank shells and things like that. You're gonna get blown to bits, but hey, your heart's not staked, so you're good. This is my fundamental issue with so many fantasy stories that are set in the modern day. The fact that they don't adhere to the rules of reality. And I can give you some lenience in the sense that it's fantasy, but these are the things that you need to think about when you're writing a story with things that aren't based in reality. You gotta contextualize it. Is it just the stake in the heart? Because I can think of a lot of ways that you can get killed without a stake in the heart. That would take effort and creative writing, so that's not something that they do. And of course, let's not forget that if you're a vampire, the only means of sustenance is drinking blood. You are now forced to kill animals or human beings and drink their bodily fluids to gain sustenance. Now, of course, if you're a serial killer or a psychopath, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, that might compel you to think, well, vampires are awesome. But it kind of breaks down once you realize that you've effectively limited your entire choice of food to one thing: blood. That's the only thing that you can eat. I mean, presumably, you can't eat other things, or if you do, they provide you no value whatsoever. So the only choice of food that you now have if you're a vampire is blood, because everything else doesn't matter. And let's just assume that the whole way it works is, well, if you need blood, then nothing else works. I mean, that's the way I would see it, because we don't eat dirt because it doesn't do anything for us, and thus we don't like eating dirt. So as a vampire, you would now only have the choice of blood. Great, no more McDonald's, no pizza, nothing like that. You can't be getting a filet mignon, you just gotta drink blood. Sounds brilliant. So where do I sign up? I mean, at least it means you can avoid the conundrum of having to pick something off of the menu because you'll never be able to eat out again because you can't fucking eat that shit. It starts sounding a lot worse once you start to think about it, doesn't it? So when you take all of that into consideration when it comes to being a zombie, you don't age, which means that you have to you have to leave all the time to avoid getting caught. You're gonna get hunted down. It's very difficult for you to die, which means that it's gonna be a very painful life. And here's something else. How does kids work? A lot of these vampire fiction stuff now involve children being born to vampires, but that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Presumably the way that it works is, oh, your parents are a vampire? Well, you're a vampire. But vampires are dead. So what's the deal? Is it a miscarriage? Is the baby just a miscarriage every time? Or is it born and then it doesn't age from that point? So, okay, so you're born, so you're a baby forever. Because that's how it should work if the idea is that vampires don't age. Oh, well, you know, they grow up and then they stop aging. You don't realize that the concept of growing up is kind of arbitrary. It's not like, oh, you're 18, you're an adult now. It's a steady growth, because at the end of the day, years are just a measurement of time. It's just a measurement of time. In terms of nature isn't familiar with the concept of a year. It's just that you've grown and that you keep growing. And we as people, well, okay, you're 18, now you're an adult. I mean, it's the general range for when you're an adult. But nature doesn't decide. Nature isn't like, okay, let's break it up into these specific categories. So we as nature, a thing that you can't like point at and be like, yeah, there's nature's brain. doesn't decide when you're a child or an adult or anything like that. These are borders that we have defined ourselves. You can't just have a kid who grows up and ends up being like 18 and, oh, now you stop aging. No, they're either dead when they're born or they're a baby forever. So basically, vampires would have to go extinct at some stage because they can't reproduce. They cannot reproduce. I don't care what happens in these movies or anything like that. They simply are incapable of reproducing, or if they do, the baby's either dead or it doesn't grow up. So great. It's so great to be a vampire. You have to leave all the time. You're probably still gonna get killed. You'll never be able to have a normal life, and you can't have kids. Wow, I envy vampires. It's great. Alright, let's jettison away from that thought experiment to talk about a few things that have happened recently, including 2 gaming-related shows. We'll start with the one that was the most cringeworthy, the Game Awards 2016. Now, I said this on my Twitter, but I did not enjoy the show at all. I was actually a little bit angry at myself for wasting so much time watching the show, because I found it to be a complete waste of time. All of the awards that were won were basically what I expected, or just ridiculous choices, which we'll talk about momentarily. And it was overladen with ads. So many ads. I mean, so many commercials, and even the world premieres are effectively ads. And most of them weren't even all that good. There was very little gameplay. A lot of them were just trailers of cutscenes, not really any gameplay or heavily cut. I don't recall any just flat out gameplay demo. Everything was very heavily edited, even including the Mass Effect Andromeda part. And when it came to the world premieres, I mean, all of the stuff, I'm like, okay, this looks cool, but I knew about this game already. The only thing that we hadn't really seen anything for were Prey and Mass Effect Andromeda, which both looked cool. Admittedly, they both looked good, but for a 2-hour show, you think that you'd have a little bit more to show us. I mean, let's start first of all by just talking about the awards. I know a lot of people disagree with Overwatch winning Game of the Year. I mean, Overwatch for me personally is probably going to be in my top 5. I love that game. I think it's fantastic. Do I think it should have won Game of the Year? I personally would have probably gone with Titanfall 2 or Doom, since I feel those games are just stellar. And even Uncharted 4, I probably would have been better with that being picked than Overwatch. Even though, if Uncharted 4 got picked, even though that game is great, I still wouldn't have picked that for my personal Game of the Year. I do think that Titanfall 2 and Doom, out of the choices that they provided, were better. They're not my top 2 games of the year, because there are other games that weren't even nominated that I consider to be up, like right up as the best games of the year, which we'll probably be talking about in a later podcast. But when it came to some of the choices, I was sitting there thinking, fucking really? Who agreed on that? I mean, best mobile game, Pokemon Go, a game that really has no gameplay, beats out Fire Emblem. I haven't played Fire Emblem, but I don't need to know that that game is better than Pokemon fucking Go. It's hardly even a game. So who sat there and said, yeah, let's go with Pokemon Go for Game of the Year? Best RPG. This one actually, I was sat there just looking at the screen thinking, I mean, first of all, you don't even give it an announcement on the stage. Oh, okay, should we dedicate some time to best RPG on the stage? Nah, let's get the Chic robot on the stage. I love that Chic robot. I thought it was hilarious, by the way. But in terms of best RPG, The Witcher 3 DLC beats out Dark Souls 3 and Deus Ex Mankind Divided. I don't understand how that's even possible. At what point does someone think downloadable content over 2 fully fledged titles? Now, I haven't played Dark Souls 3, I plan to pick it up, but I've heard nothing but good things, and Deus Ex Mankind Divided is fantastic. It's flawed, it's kind of lacking in terms of some of its content, but it was thoroughly enjoyable. I would have been very happy if that game won for Best RPG. But nah, Witcher 3 wins for DLC. Look, The Witcher 3 is a fantastic game. I'm glad it won Game of the Year last year, but you can't DLC over a full game. It's illogical. Who thought that was a good idea? And can we talk about those awful performances? I mean, oh my god, aside from Mick Gordon's excellent Doom performance, those were unbearably bad. I don't know who thought that those were a good idea for a show that is largely watched by jaded, cynical gamers who like to mock everything and who certainly are not fans of that kind of music by and large, who thought, yeah, let's get, what was it, Ray Schrimmer? Yeah, let's get Ray Schrimmer at a gaming show. Who thought that was a good idea? The Mick Gordon performance was fantastic. That was excellent. Probably one of the best live performances I've ever seen at any award show. That was brilliant. Whoever decided to get him there deserves a raise. But when it comes to the other ones, I don't know what they were thinking, but it certainly didn't work. And if my Twitter feed was any indication, people weren't really digging it. Who could have seen that coming? Overall, I think a lot of people didn't really enjoy this one. And I haven't enjoyed any of them, personally. But this one was probably the worst because there were tons of ads. A lot of it felt really pandering. There was just these ridiculous things that they were doing, like promoting the Assassin's Creed film at a games show, showing montages of nothing but cutscenes to open the show about how great games are. You think maybe showing gameplay at a game show would be a good idea? The reveals were fine, but nothing mind-blowing. And a lot of the awards were just strange choices. And plus, there was just the cringe. The cringe was so much cringe. As much as I love that Schick robot, because I just thought that was the funniest thing ever, then you had those moments like the dude doing the VR. Oh, it's like you're really there. Oh, good job, mate. But overall, I didn't really enjoy the show. I found it to be thoroughly boring. And I was annoyed at myself for sitting there and watching it because I had Watch Dogs 2 sitting on my PC that I've been meaning to play. I've got other games that I've been playing lately that I wanted to play. I had 2 hours that I could have spent playing those games, but instead I watched a show for which the awards were, yeah, I expected that, or wow, that's a stupid choice. However, thankfully, Sony came along with the PlayStation experience a few days later, and it was good. I didn't watch the whole thing, but in terms of certain announcements that I saw, they were good. I probably wouldn't have enjoyed it as much if I sat there and watched the whole thing, because that tends to be something that happens. You sit there and watch the whole thing, it's not very entertaining. But it was on at 4 a.m. I'm not staying up to 4 a.m. to watch this show. Though in hindsight, it might have been cool because then I could have had the live reaction to Crash. Some of you may not know this, but Crash 3 is my favorite game of all time, or at least tied with Ratchet & Clank 3. I love the original PlayStation Crash games. They were my childhood. They were really my introduction to video games. And they're the reason why I love games, and particularly platformers. And those games shaped sort of my view of gaming. I love Crash Bandicoot, and it's been so upsetting to see him just being thrown to the wayside for the last decade, and even further than that. Once he transitioned into the PS2, there just started to be this decline in the quality of it. Everything up until Crash Bash, fantastic. So I'm thrilled that they're doing this, and it seems like they're actually trying to make a really good, faithful update to these games, because it seems like they're not changing the fundamental gameplay, which is good because it was perfect as it was, but they're updating the style without changing the style. It looks like the natural evolution of what Crash would look like, as opposed to what they did with the Crash Mind Over Mutant or whatever it was, where they just radically changed the style and changed the style of the whole series from what it was. It showed that they didn't understand why people liked Crash. People liked him because he's a goofy, wacky, sort of dumb hero who has personality, who has style, and is having fun doing what he's doing. He's a very interesting character despite how little he says and how little you think that there would be at surface value. When you make him act like an idiot, just for the sake of being an idiot, you've misunderstood what Crash's character is. But in this, obviously, because they're just directly adapting the first 3 games, that's not going to be an issue. And I have no issue with that. I'm going to be buying that game day one. I probably will even pre-order. I don't care. It's Crash Bandicoot. I love Crash Bandicoot. And I'm so happy that he's coming back. And I'm hoping that this will kick off a revival series of true PlayStation 1 style Crash Bandicoot games. Will they be as good as the original games? Probably not. I don't see how that's even possible. But I hope that they're just going to be some really fun 90s style PlayStation 1 classic 3D platforming, because that certainly is fairly absent in the modern gaming landscape. Aside from Mario, which I also love, you just don't see a lot of that anymore, which is a real shame because I'm just such a big fan of these older 3D platformers like Ratchet and Clank, the Sly Cooper series, and of course the 3D Marios, which don't come around that often. There's just so many of these great old school platformers, and Spyro as well, that we just don't see anymore. It'd be great if they had some sort of revival, because I'm sure I'm not the only one who really loved those games. I mean, a lot of people in my age bracket grew up on those games. Come on guys, get onto it. Let's start making these games. Of course, the biggest announcement out of this show was The Last of Us Part 2, which I was kind of expecting. I mean, I was hoping that they wouldn't make a new Last of Us, because I feel like the first game concluded everything well. I didn't think that there was any more that they needed to tell. I mean, I'm guessing that they've obviously come up with some ideas, otherwise they wouldn't be making a second game. But if they were going to do it, I was hoping that maybe focus on different characters, maybe even in a different time period, like earlier in the infection, like the early days of the outbreak. That might have been interesting. But obviously it's Naughty Dog, so I'm still interested in getting it. It did look cool. It did look good, and I do like The Last of Us. I remember I did a review on it in 2014, and my opinions have since changed. I like it more because I put a lot of time into the multiplayer, which was fantastic. I'm hoping that it will live up to the legacy of the first game, which I very much did enjoy, but at the same time, I can't help but feel a little bit disappointed that we're not getting a new IP from Naughty Dog, because now that this game's coming out, what does that mean? It means that it will have been close to, 5 or 6 years since a new IP was announced by them. I was just hoping that they'd get onto something new a bit sooner, because I really want to see what Naughty Dog does next. Maybe even go back to less serious and maybe more friendly kind of game, like they did with Crash, and to a lesser extent the Jack series. I also saw that they announced Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, which, I mean, I figure it was worthwhile them finally releasing a new Marvel vs. Capcom game, because I know a lot of people didn't like 3, which I can understand given that there were certain glaring omissions that they finally seem to have rectified by putting Mega Man in it. Who'd have thought, Capcom, that people would like the thing that built your whole company? Who'd have thought that people would have liked that property? I might even pick it up, even though I have issues with the way that they handled Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Hopefully they've learnt their lesson. I mean, it seems like Capcom are starting to turn things around. They're starting to realize what they need to do to actually be profitable again. We also saw a little bit of Danganronpa V3, which I'm looking forward to because I love Danganronpa 2. I still haven't played the first one, but the second one was awesome. So I'm looking forward to that. And we did see new Uncharted DLC. I wasn't super impressed with the gameplay because there was very little of it. It was mostly walking. I don't think that was a good thing to show because it was just walking. It was walking the whole time. And I wasn't really surprised I was surprised when Nadine showed up, but I wasn't surprised that it was Chloe. I could tell immediately when you could see her eyes through the veil. It was obvious that it was her. But I'm still obviously looking forward to it. Naughty Dog make really good single-player DLC if The Last of Us Left Behind was any indication. So I'm looking forward to picking it up. Overall, I thought it was a pretty good showing in terms of the things that they announced. There were these good announcements. And I think that was key. There were just these really good announcements. So the last topic before we get into the Q&A section is about something that I noticed. There was a certain person who shall remain nameless who I had discovered had blocked me on my main Twitter account, even though I had never talked to him before. And through certain perusing of my Twitter feed, I discovered that I had been blocked purely because I followed another YouTuber who that person disagrees with. Now, my immediate thought was, well, that's a stupid idea because now I can't even see your tweets. So you've now just blocked a potential follower. I mean, of course, I wasn't gonna follow him because I don't like his content and I don't agree with the things that he says. But I just find it interesting that someone would do something so foolish as to basically block off someone from potentially viewing their content. This is something that you will notice with a lot of the channels or Twitter people who like to block. or who like to protect their tweets, or who like to turn off the comment section because they don't want you to tell them what you think. They don't have a lot of growth because, interestingly enough, when you prevent viewer engagement, you don't do well on YouTube. Who'd have thought that? Not only is it the right thing to do to let people criticize you, it's logical from a business perspective if you're trying to make money off of doing stuff on the internet. Let people interact with you. See, I find these people who like to block and censor, I don't understand the gall that these people have to have, the ego that someone has to have to think that they're definitely right, so you're not allowed to criticize me. No dissent allowed. How much of a big head would you have to think that you're so right about everything that nobody could have any valid criticism of you? It blows my mind, because even on things where I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure that I'm right on this. I'm pretty confident in what I've said. I'm never gonna just be like, okay, well, I think that I'm right, so you don't get to tell me that I'm wrong. That's not how discussion works. It's funny, because some of these people talk about how they want a reasonable discussion, and yet they're the same people who prevent discussion at every turn. It does nothing to help your case, because when people see that you moderate, a lot of people immediately think, with just cause, oh, so you're afraid of other people's opinions. Because that's what it indicates to a lot of people, that you're afraid of other people's opposing opinions to yours. And it's detrimental to you as well, which is why I always advocate to keep your comment sections open, to be transparent, and to actually engage with your audience. I don't do this Q&A section for no reason. I want to hear what people's questions are. I like talking to people who engage with my content. It's a good thing. I don't understand how these people don't see that it's a good thing to interact with people, to hear their opinion, and find out that you may actually be wrong and be corrected on the thing you were wrong on. It feels good to be less wrong. Even if you feel like you're never wrong, ever. Everybody is wrong sometimes. At the end of the day, even if they continue to block and all of these things, more power to them. It just means that my stuff will excel while their stuff flounders. Because every channel that is block happy, that likes to delete comments, or otherwise not interact and just moderate and have it be an echo chamber, fails. Echo chambers are bad for everybody, especially the person doing it. But I don't feel bad for them, because if they want to maintain that kind of echo chamber, they're probably a massive twat. Alright, to wrap up the show, let's go to the Q&A. The question that we have today is from Fell Glint, and their question is, what kind of content do you enjoy watching on YouTube, and who/what are some of the channels you regularly watch? I think that in terms of the channels that I watch, there's a little bit more of a diverse selection in terms of the types of content that I watch. I mean, it especially becomes clear when I go on Twitter and look at people I'm following and see these stark differences between who I know who are following specific channels. When it comes to me, obviously a bulk of it is gaming related, stuff to do with comic books, movies, all of that kind of thing. But then I also have the stuff that I look at in terms of animation, cartoons. I mean, of course, I'm a cartoonist. I also am planning on doing animation soon. To get back into it. Yeah, obviously, I love the hell out of animation. And then there are also the skeptic videos, things that are talking about politics. And in terms of that, I try and get as diverse views as possible. I mean, of course, I'm not going to subscribe to someone who I just think is wrong on everything. But when it comes to it, I like to not just follow this people who agree on everything. Because when it comes to the elusive skeptic community, not everybody agrees on everything. I mean, we've seen people run the gambit from central left to left wing to people who are right or even alt-right. You know, it's good to pay attention to what all of these guys are saying, because despite what people say, it is retarded to not listen to what everybody has to say to a reasonable degree. I mean, of course, if they're doing the Sieg Heil, you probably don't want to be watching them. But when it comes to just reasonable differing opinions, I like to hear these differing opinions because it helps form a good conclusion. This is what I would recommend, is watching people, even if you don't necessarily agree with them on everything, just so that you can gather those different points of view and help form your own conclusion. But a conclusion that's founded on having done research and listened to a wide gambit of individuals. But when it comes to, of course, watching stuff, I want to be entertained as well, which is where the gaming stuff comes in and where the comedy things come in. There certainly isn't enough time in the day to do as much as I think all of us would like to do. We all want to play games, watch movies, watch TV shows, read comics, and do other things, as well as watch YouTube videos. It's a desperate struggle trying to maintain leisure time. Woe is me, it's a hard life. Thank you for tuning in for episode 2 of the Cynical Den Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. Remember that if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave a question that I can respond to in the next episode of the podcast. Feel free to check out the other content on Crude Penguin, from the website to Twitter and Facebook. All of the links are in the description. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Cynical Den Podcast.